Good morning, everyone.
Good
Good
morning,
morning,
everyone.
little boy.
We are learning Mishnayos Erevin, chapter Mishnah Parak Ches, chapter 8, Mishnah Yud, Mishnah 10. Okay, again, we're talking about discussion of pouring out wastewater. So in the previous Mishnah, we spoke about pouring it into a chutzner, and the chutzner is next to the public domain. And we say that if the dimensions of the chutzner are four tefachim by 4 tefachim, then we say that we can assume that the water is going to get absorbed within that area and not flow out into the public domain. If it does, it was unintentional and it's not a problem. But if it's going to be the courtyard is less than 4 cubits, 4 amas. If it's four amas by 4 amas, so which is whatever, let's say an amas 2 feet at the most, 8 by 8. And if it's less than that, then you cannot pour the water out on Shabbos because of the fact that then it's not going to get absorbed into the ground unless you make a uka, which is a cesspool that holds 2 sa'ah of water from the overflow hole and below, because then the water is going to basically stay in there. Okay, so now we have another case. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov says, Bib shuhu kamor arba ames b'shus harabim. A bib means a drainage channel. Okay, you're basically pouring the water into the drainage channel, and that drainage channel is take the water out into the public domain. But we say that the bib, this drainage channel is kamor. It's covered. It has a dome on it over the first 4 amas that it goes into the public domain. So you've got the channel. It's in your courtyard. The channel then leads into the public domain. And by the time that it gets into the public, when it gets to the public domain, the first 4 amas, when it's in the public domain, have a dome over it. Now, in the previous Mishnah, we spoke about how when you had that cesspool, that if it's in the Rishus Harabim, but it's covered, so then it's not a problem of being in the Rishus Harabim, because by covering it, it's not accessible. You can't, the people in Rishus Harabim don't have access to it. So therefore, it's not part of the Rishus Harabim. And therefore, in this case, if you have that dome over the first 4 cubits that the channel enters the public domain, then by putting the dome over it, it's not considered in the public domain. And since you gave it 4 amas covered, so we said if you have a 4 by 4, the water is going to get absorbed there. So as long as the channel is dug into the ground or it's lined with some kind of material that can absorb, and it's happening within an area of 4 amas by 4 amas, actually, based on what the previous Mishnah said, then you're okay, because it's going to be absorbed by the time it gets into the part that's out of the public domain. So you're pouring it directly into this channel. The water is going. Part of this water. This water is going to go into the area outside of your chutzner. It's going to go, but since that area that it's going to go into the public domain or outside of your chutzner is covered over, and so being covered over, we say it's not part of the public domain. Is it going to flow further than the covering? Well, since that area that's covered is 4 cubits by 4 cubits, that's the area that we say you can assume when you pour water there that it's going to get absorbed. So therefore, you are pouring directly into this channel, which already maybe not even starting in your chutzner. It is starting somewhat in your chutzner because of the fact that you want that's 1 second. Yeah. It's starting in your chutzner, but then it goes into the area that's outside of your chutzner that's covered over. It's not Rishus Harabim. And because that area is 4 by 4, we assume the water is going to get absorbed. If it goes even beyond that, we're not so concerned about it because there was no intention to do that. So according to Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, you want to pour the water directly into the channel, and it has all these conditions taken care of, that in the first 4 cubits, when it gets into what would be the public domain, it's covered and it's 4 by 4. You can pour the water into the channel and assume that it's going to get absorbed and there's no problems. The Chachamim say, even if this drainage channel is running alongside a roof or a chutzner or a courtyard, 100 amas long, that means you're pouring it into the channel, right? By the time it's going to get anywhere near the public domain, it's going to be 100 amas, 200 feet, or 150 feet, okay? Which you would think should be plenty of room for it to get absorbed. Lo yishpoich al pi abib. You cannot pour it directly into the channel. And the problem, according to the Chachamim, is that once you pour it directly into the channel, if let's say some of it does not get absorbed into the ground and it comes out on the other side into what is actually public domain, people who see it are going to see it come out with a certain force. And because they're going to see it come out with a certain force, they're going to think that you poured out that water right. You pour that water at right there, like right there at that point where it's coming out into the Rishus Harabim. People are going to think you poured the water into the channel right next to the Rishus Harabim, and which means you poured it with real intention for it to go into the public domain. And people are going to think, therefore, that it's okay to pour water into public domain, which is not true. So the concern of the Chachamim is, let me just read it to you from here. When on occasion some water does go into the public domain, it will flow out with some force since it was poured directly into the channel. People will therefore think that he poured out the water right next to the public domain, intending for it to flow into the public domain. As a result, they might permit pouring water directly into the public domain on Shabbos. That's the concern, that people might think you can do that. And therefore, they say there is no way to be able to, you may not, according to Midrabanan, according to rabbinic law, you may not pour the water directly into the channel. Aval sheichach legag. What you could do, though, is pour it onto a roof that's overhanging the drainage channel. V'hamayim yardin lebib, and then the water goes down into the channel. And then what happens then is that even if the water then eventually does flow out into the public domain, it'll be very weak. It won't come out with any kind of force. And no one's going to think that you poured it out right next to the public domain. So if you do it in that way, then you can get rid of the wastewater on Shabbos. Okay. Then the Mishnah continues, going back to what was discussed before. We mentioned before that if you have a courtyard that is 4 amas by 4 amas, you can pour the water there, right onto the courtyard, because if it's that kind of area, you can assume the water is going to get absorbed there. If it was less than that, where you can't assume the water is going to absorb, you got to dig that cesspool. So now the Mishnah says like this: Hachotzer v'achsadra mitzaref l'arba amas. Let's say your courtyard is less than 4 amas, but right next to the courtyard is an achsadra. They translate a achsadra as a portico. A portico, they explain down here, is a roofed area without walls, with columns supporting the roof. Others explained it that a portico is basically closed on 3 sides but open on 1 side. But the point is that one is a chutzner, your courtyard, and one is this roofed area. And it's not the courtyard; it's a different kind of area. Nonetheless, if together they create an area 4 amas by 4 cubits by 4 cubits, then you can pour the water there. Because although they are different types of areas, they can combine to form the 4-cubit area that you need to say, when you pour the water there, that you can assume it's going to get absorbed there. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Now, what